Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Electricity Northwest Net Zero and Flexibility in the Northwest webinar. Lovely to have you here. I'm Catherine, and confusingly enough, I'm not from Electricity Northwest. I'm from a company called Elevate. We're a business development consultancy with a focus on innovation, sustainability, and community, which ties in beautifully with all of the excellent work that Electricity Northwest is doing across the region. We've worked together before on events such as the electric vehicles event last year. We've worked together recently on some regional stakeholder events, but this is actually the first joint event focusing on how Electricity Northwest is supporting businesses in terms of getting to net zero, as well as their transition to DSO and requirements for flexible energy. There will be follow-up webinars throughout the year with updates on those flexible energy requirements. So keep an eye out for those if that's something that's particularly of interest to you. Just wanted to flag up that we are recording today's webinar. So just be aware that that is happening in the background. We don't plan on sort of sharing this webinar anywhere currently, but we will let you know what's going on with that. We are delighted today to have a really wide range of businesses and organisations from across the Northwest in the audience. If you want to take this opportunity to use the chat function to just let us know who you are, where you're from, where you're dialing in from today, just because we're a bit nosy and we want to know who you are and kind of make sure that these presentations are tailored to your needs. Also, feel free to use that chat function throughout the webinar to pop in any questions that you've got for any of the speakers. We've got a few Q&A sessions scheduled in throughout the morning. So we'll pick up any questions there and hopefully get them answered for you. And if we can't answer them for you today, we will make sure that we pick up with you after the webinar to get you the answers that you need. Just a few sort of housekeeping rules. As I said, we are recording this webinar. We also would ask that you keep yourself on mute and keep your cameras off for the majority of the webinar, or for all of the webinar, I should say, as there's a lot of people in here today and we don't want any sort of feedback issues or anything like that. We'll also have a few polls throughout the webinar to sort of canvass your ideas and views on certain things. So keep an eye out for those as well and give us a shout in the chat box if you're struggling with accessing any of those when they're live. That's it from me. I will shut up now and hand over to our first speaker, which is Johnny Sadler, who is the Strategic Decarbonisation Manager. And Johnny's going to talk about net zero, what that means for businesses, and also how Electricity Northwest can support you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Catherine. As Catherine said, I am the Strategic Decarbonisation Manager here at Electricity Northwest, and I lead our work to engage businesses on net zero so they understand what it means to them, what benefits they can expect to achieve, and also, most importantly, making sure they've got in place the support that they need to take practical action on their journey to net zero. So I've got a fairly short slot this morning. What I'd just like to try and do is set the scene more widely in terms of net zero, what it is, what it means, and then at the back end, I'll leave you with some slightly more practical tips and actions that you might want to take away on the back of today's session. So just before we do that, let me explain a little bit about who Electricity Northwest are, if you don't know who we are and what we do. We are one of 6 distribution network operators across the UK. And essentially what we do is we're responsible for distributing the electricity across our part of the region. So we take the high voltage electricity from the national grid and we distribute that through our local network to the 2.4 million homes and businesses across the region. Now, we are essentially a monopoly, so we're the only DNO in this part of the region, and on that basis, we're regulated. So we're regulated by Ofgem on behalf of government, and everything that we do has to be approved by Ofgem. So Ofgem approve our business plans, and those plans have to have 2 key ingredients in them. One, they've got to be aligned with government policy, So UK Net Zero 2050 is probably the biggest bit of policy we're aligned with right now. And secondly, and probably most importantly, I'd argue, the needs of our local customers and stakeholders. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. And as we all sit here today, really excited to be able to share with you that we published our new business plan for the next investment period on Wednesday of this week. So the period 2023 to 28 will see us invest £1.8 billion in the network to respond to the needs of our customers and stakeholders. Next one, please, Lynn. So where are we? Couple of weeks out now from COP26 in Glasgow. Where did we get to? Well, the good news is round about 90% now of global carbon emissions are covered by some form of commitment on climate change. So that's very positive. So we've got to that point. Slightly less positive is that of those commitments, 73% of them have been deemed to be inadequate in relation to the 1.5 degree goal. It's by an organisation called Climate Action Tracker who've done that analysis. So good coverage in terms of targets, but they're not yet in line with the 1.5 degree goal. And you'll see on that image on the right-hand side there, how far away from that 1.5 goal we currently are. So based on the policies that are formally in place and the actions that are currently being taken, we're on track for a 2.7 degree rise in global temperatures relative to pre-industrial levels. So way beyond that 1.5 goal. I always like to leave on a slightly more positive note. The positive thing is that there is now a commitment to ramp up actions and commitments on an annual basis. That was previously a 5-year cycle that we were working to under the Paris Agreement. National and international commitments will now be ramped up on an annual basis, starting in Egypt next year at COP27. Next one, please, Lynn. So you might have seen on that previous slide that only 6% of those commitments that had been made were deemed to be acceptable. Really pleased to be able to say that the UK and the UK's net zero strategy is in that 6%. So we have a strategy for the country which is in line with that 1.5 degree goal. I won't talk to this slide in a huge amount of detail because you'll be able to pick up all of this through essentially government policy and strategy documents, but a few headlines: 68% reduction in CO2 by 2030, 78% reduction by 2035, and reaching net zero by 2050. So those are some of the big headlines that you'll see in the net zero strategy. In terms of what that breaks down to in terms of the 3 sectors you can see there, no petrol or diesel car or light van sales after 2030, no hybrid car or light van sales after 2035, and only zero emission HGVs from 2040 onwards. So some fairly ambitious commitments there, and slightly ahead of where we got to with some of those international commitments that were made in Glasgow. Within the energy sector, which obviously we are part of, there's a commitment now that all electricity in the UK will be decarbonised by 2035. So as we sit here today, 43% of the UK's electricity comes from renewable sources. So not quite where we need to be, but if you compare that to where we were just 10 years ago, that's up from 7%. So that gives you a sense of how quickly the energy sector has been decarbonising and the positive path that we're already on. And in buildings and heating, you will probably already be aware that for the last 2 or 3 years, it's only been possible to rent domestic and non-domestic properties that have an energy performance certificate of an A to E. So anything an F or a G, it's illegal to rent those properties out now. No gas in new build properties from 2025. In terms of what the heating source of the future is going to be, is it going to be electrification? Is it going to be hydrogen? It's going to be a bit of both, is certainly our view on the world, but the balance between hydrogen and electrification, we will get a decision from government in 2026 on that. And in the meantime, the focus is very much on trying to deliver a range of different pilot projects to deliver firstly a hydrogen village and then a hydrogen town to test whether or not hydrogen is the right fuel source for heating domestic properties, alongside the use of hydrogen for decarbonising industrial processes. And irrespective of the outlook on hydrogen, we expect to see 600,000 heat pumps per year installed by 2028. So lots of really bold commitments there and lots of action already underway. Next one, please, Lynn. In the Northwest, we've also got a whole range of even more ambitious commitments that have been brought forward over the last couple of years. So you'll be familiar with these, I'm sure, depending on which part of the region you're dialing in from. Net zero by 2038 in Greater Manchester, 2030 in Lancashire, and 2037 in Cumbria. So really good to see that accelerated ambition within our political and business and community stakeholders across the region. Next one. So just to step in now, within that context, really, what does this mean for us as Electricity Northwest, as your DNO? And on the next slide, I'll talk through what this means for you as a business. So for us, there's three things we've committed to do, and you'll see this set out in our business plan. Firstly, leading by example. So becoming an exemplar net zero organisation, so we can demonstrate to you, to our other customers, to our communities, what does it actually mean to be net zero? What kind of technologies are involved? What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the lessons learned that we've arrived at to help your journey to net zero be as smooth as possible? Second thing is on preparing our network. So if I give you the example of electric vehicles, we've got about 12,000 on the roads across the region today. That needs to be more like 250,000 by 2025. And about 3 million by 2050. So that gives you a sense of the scale of change we can expect and the increasing demand that will be on our network for EVs, heat pumps, solar panels, etc. And we've got to make sure the network has got the capacity that it needs for when our customers are ready to connect those low carbon technologies. So that's the second thing we're committed to do. Again, you'll see that in the business plan. And the third area of activity is a relatively new one for us, but it's one we've heard really clearly in the conversations we've had with our customers and stakeholders over the last couple of years, is that whilst increasingly people are ready to start doing something on net zero, to start to better manage their energy, they're not entirely sure where to start. So we've got a commitment to start to roll out new programs of support for our domestic customers, business customers, and community groups from next year and into the new business plan period starting in 2023. So those are the three things that we'll be doing over the next 6 years. Next one, Lynn. Now, I'm not going to talk to this slide in a huge amount of detail today, but as I mentioned in the previous slide, increasingly our customers come to us and say, you understand about the energy industry, you understand about climate change, what do we need to do as businesses, as individuals, etc. And we've set out here these 4 key chunks of activity, if you like. So these are the 4 chunks of activity that we've started to deliver on our own journey to net zero, in which we think, having had a chance to refine them over the last couple of years, we think these are incredibly relevant to every business across the region and across the UK indeed. So more information will become available on our website, but for now, just to start to give you a sense of the kind of things that we would recommend every business take, it's what you can see on this slide here, and we'll share this with you after today's session. Last one from me. If you would like to follow up with a bit more information on anything that I've covered in these slides, you'll find all of that on our website on the Net Zero Hub, and you'll find a range of different sources of information through those other websites you can see on the screen there. But for now, hopefully that helps to set the scene for the rest of today's session, and look forward to talking more later in the Q&A. Thank you.
Brill, thank you so much for that, Johnny. Really good setting the scene there for us, thank you. Next up, we have Martin Yates, who is the Head of Reward, and he's going to talk about employee carbon incentives.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, everyone. So as I said, I'm Martin Yates, Head of Reward at Electricity North West, and my role is to basically incentivise colleagues to come and work for us and just to stay working for us. And as part of that, we want to promote our journey to zero carbon and get our colleagues to come on that journey with us. So what I want to do today is just share what we've done so far, share our journey so far, and hopefully you can learn from that, but also maybe we can learn from each other. So actually we'll go to the next slide, please. It'd be great to start with a poll. So if you could just, there's two questions. How many people on the call have got electric vehicles, so I've said EVs, but electric vehicles on their company car policy? And how many people have introduced a salary sacrifice car scheme with electric vehicles? And I've not made that one specific. So it'd just be good to understand where people on the call are with their journey of bringing electric vehicles in, and then that will help with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Still on this slide, aren't we? Lynn, can we go to the next slide? Oh, thank you, thank you. So what this slide is, and obviously every company is structured differently, but this is just from an Electricity North West experience, the way we're structured and who we got involved with coming up with our initiatives and who's key to actually promoting the initiatives we have. So our car provider, it is obviously very key to it because they have to be willing to come on the journey with us, and what's great about that is they are very keen on promoting electric vehicles as well for their image and to obviously play their part to zero carbon. We've got our reward platform, so making sure that so we can engage with colleagues and promote these things. We've got a platform in which to do that. Trade unions, very, very important. I'll come to more on that on the next slide. We've got an internal fleet team that you have to work very closely with because, of course, they help negotiate the deals to get the right manufacturers on. But HR, reward and comms team to make sure everyone's well informed of the initiative so that they can promote them within the business. And we've also got within Electricity North West, we've got business support teams. So we've got a lot of people in operations who are out and about in fields and various places fixing things, and it's just about how we reach them. And business support we find is a very good way of reaching them, so word of mouth, notice boards, text messages, that kind of thing. So that's just to give a bit of an indication of the sort of the communication channels and who we've got on board to help us with our initiatives. The one that isn't on the slide, which is worth a mention, is we do have internal working parties, almost like ideas forums where people from different areas of the business can contribute and sort of say, well, why don't we think about that, or why don't we look into that? And that's also very invaluable with regards to getting the right ideas and then getting the messages across. Next slide, please, Lynn. So I've put sort of linked to the previous slide, but put these three pillars to success, and they probably come in order actually. So colleague engagement and buy-in, it's really important, and Johnny referred to carbon literacy in his slides. And education is vital. It's getting the hearts and minds of people focused on this. You do get people out there who are still doubtful of climate change and that kind of thing. So getting the education out there, getting the buy-in, getting colleagues interested in want to take action is really, really important. And then that leads them to having the right communication channels I've mentioned previously. We're a company that's emails and various things work, but other times it doesn't for others. So it's communication channels. The reminders is really important. It's one of the things that can be thing, what will there be next month or next year, but not going away. It's really important. So it's about keep the drum. And vehicles, you've got the range anxiety side of things as well. So it's about addressing those sort of concerns through your communication channels. And then finally, clarity. So there are financial incentives, there's big wins as part of things, certainly around electric vehicle cycle to work schemes, those kind of things. Some really, really big wins on that, but it's pointless having them incentives unless that's made clear and available to people and in an understandable way, so people can really see what they can save and what's in it for them. And just I mentioned the trade unions previously with the colleague engagements and buy-in. I think the success of our company car electric vehicle scheme, and just to give you a bit of a stat on since we launched it, I think 75% of orders have been electric, and we've just done a survey for people who've got an option to switch to electric, about 100 cars in scope, and 92% of those wanted to switch. So we've got a really engaged workforce who want to switch to electric. Our company's car scheme and the trade unions were vital in that, because we explained the benefits to them, especially financial from a tax perspective, and that landed really well. Next slide, please. So what incentives do we provide to colleagues? I appreciate I've focused a bit on vehicles, but so that this one is specifically vehicles, and the next slide is a few other things that we're looking at. So electric vehicles on the car policy, as I've mentioned, but we used to also have a longer term sort of lease policy for 4 years, and we switched it to 3 because we wanted to keep it more flexible. We've also now given people a 6-month lead time in which to order a new car, so it's because of the problems with lead times and cars coming through. So it gives people that more flexibility, and obviously the range on new cars is changing all the time and increasing all the time. So we want to keep up to date with that, really, so colleagues can get the best cars for them. We have, for our car allowance population, so people who aren't entitled to a company car but get a car allowance, we've enhanced that for people who choose electric or plug-in vehicles. So if you get a weve, a plug-in hybrid, so again, financial incentives for people to sort of purchase their own car, but via the car allowance. We also offer free charging at our depots. We are in a bit of a fortunate position with this being an electricity company, but we do offer that for all colleagues, and it's especially for people who maybe don't qualify for a car or a car allowance. We have had some people who've chosen an EV, and they can still claim 45 pence per mile when they're travelling on business, which is so effective. That's the other benefit for them. And also home charging payment, so giving people £150 towards a home charger. Again, just in promotion with electric vehicles. Next slide, please, Lynn. We've also launched an Affinity Scheme, which is basically our car provider, which is a discount scheme. Now, it's not this is one that's not gone as well as yet, because if you walk in a showroom yourself, you probably get a similar deal, but that is improving all of the time. But what we're trying to do with it now is look at almost like the second-hand market side of things. So, for example, a car now that might do 250-mile range, in a year or two's time, we might look at ranges of 600-700 miles. But them cars shouldn't then just be on the scrap heap. There'll be someone who's ready to take that step there. So we're trying to tune in with that, and so we can basically get the next level of affordability people onto the EV scheme through that Affinity Scheme. So that's something that we've introduced and are evolving. Away from cars a little bit, we've offered season tickets for people who travel maybe on the train or the bus, 12-month forms, interest-free. Obviously with COVID, it's not really taken off too well, but there has been people who have taken that up. But it's just something we can to help promote better travel. Cycle to work scheme. So I think a couple of years ago now, the government removed the £1,000 limit. So we got rid of that altogether. We do have a sort of a limit of 2,500, but people can go above that, providing they meet an earnings criterion and get approval. So there is sort of no limit, and we do have people, really keen cyclists in the business that take us up on that, and there's massive savings available there. And again, going back to the education side of things, it is the most important thing, really. Keep campaigning, keep on the education piece, really important to get colleagues engaged. Next slide, please. There's just sort of put this into the benefits of promoting EVs for you. And maybe when I see the results of the survey, I'll see where a lot of you are up to with this. But taxation, big savings there. To take the lead with other businesses. So if you're seen as making this step, it might give other businesses confidence to do the same, and to empower individual colleagues to reduce the carbon footprint. And obviously then colleagues jump on this, and then you've got friends and family also, and that's how you start the movement going. So there is a lot of benefits to doing this, financial, and because it is the right thing to do. Next slide, please. So this is just a specific example around cars, and sorry if many of you are aware of this, but this is the kind of slide that really helped with our trade unions to really promote this. I appreciate it's a little bit out of date, but I'll give you the up-to-date information. But when the government announced the benefit in kind would be 0% for EV, the savings were massive. So if you look at the bottom three sort of headings, you've got Class 1A national insurance, so that's what the employer pays on the benefit. So that was zero for that year. And at someone at 20% taxpayer, if they would have chosen a Kia Niro compared to a Kia Sportage petrol, the savings.
What it's doing, in there's no point in. Sorry.
Yes, it's savings of £5,500 to £6,000 and a 40% taxpayer, absolutely massive over a 36-month lease. So just you're probably already aware of this, but if you're not, but the benefit in kind of 22-23 of 2% has been frozen for a further 3 years. So that again, these savings are going to be available for a longer time. So this is just to illustrate the kind of savings individuals and companies make on tax and national insurance by choosing EV. And I think that's my last slide. So I'll hand back over to Catherine, but thank you for listening.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Martin. I've also published the results of the poll, so you can have a quick look there if you're interested. But some quite interesting facts come through, which is great. If you do have any questions for Martin or Johnny or any of our speakers today, please do drop them in the chat box. I've noticed a couple come through already, which is fab. But next we'll hand over to Simon Brook, who is the Capacity Strategy Manager, who will be talking about the changing energy network.
Thanks, Catherine, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take 5 to 10 minutes just to give you a bit of an overview, talk through the framework of how we are supporting and facilitating the zero carbon journey through the transformation of our network from a distribution network operator to a distribution system operator. So next slide, please, Lynn. So the visual at the top of the screen shows how complex our network currently is. Historically, we used to generate electricity centrally at the transmission voltage network and then distribute that to all of our customers. And that's the first 4 blocks or the first 4 diagrams at the top of the screen. And in the last 25 years, what we've seen is increasing volumes of distributed generation connect to our network, and people now starting to adopt EVs, put solar panels on their roofs. We've now started to see large storage battery operations. And in the last 18 months, we've started to see hydrogen electrolyzers connect to our network. So what this means for our network is we've got a huge range of varying different energy flows across our network at different times of the day. And that causes us to have a significant impact on how we manage our network. And that means that we need to have a much greater control and an ability to flex those customers and those parties that connect to our network. And we do that through a smart and flexible energy management system. So in the next 25 years, we will see significant volumes of EVs and solar panels and more distributed generation connect to our network. And as Johnny said, the debate about hydrogen is still out. But we expect to see a lot more hydrogen electrolyzers connect to our network to create green hydrogen, which is the generation of hydrogen using renewable energy sources. Next slide, please, Lynn. So in the next price control period, Ofgem have already defined for us what they believe is the roles and activities of a distribution system operator. And they're pretty straightforward, really, and they are things that we already do now as DNOs or network operators. but we will enhance them, expand them, and do a lot more, particularly around market development. So as far as planning and network development is concerned, we do a lot of forecasting now, and our DFAS publication, which is available on our website, shows you what we believe will happen, how our network will be expanded, and what we believe the number of EVs, solar panels, distributed generation will be connected to our network between now and 2050. As far as network operations is concerned, the intention is that we will be more smart and flexible. We will manage things in real time, and we'll be able to curtail and bring people on as we flex our network and customers to be able to manage for peaks and any events that we face on our network. And under the market operation role, we've got this really huge obligation now to act as a neutral market facilitator. So what that really means is we have to be able to justify where we spend our investments. So do we invest in flexibility? Do we buy flexibility from a commercial market to be able to operate our network, or do we build assets? And that's hugely important for developing the flexibility requirements for the future. And these three roles are underpinned by data. A huge obligation on Ofgem of all licensees to start to share their data for operating and managing their network. So next slide, please. So as I said, I was part of the business plan team putting together what we believe we will do to facilitate net zero as part of our next price control. And we've redrawn the landscape of what we believe are our DSO roles and activities. So you see the three central blocks in blue in the beginning, in the middle, and then we've added the customer support. So this links back to what Johnny said right at the beginning, whereas we see there's a huge role for us as part of DSO to actually guide customers and help them make decisions about adopting low carbon technologies. And when they adopt low carbon technologies, how they can provide that flexibility to people like ourselves. To overcome the conflicts of interest that we may perceived as having for deciding whether we build assets or buy flexibility, we've decided that all of the decisions that we make will be transparent. And we've created two new organizations that will help us do that. So we're going to create a DSO stakeholder panel, and that will be a panel of representatives, and they will be able to view our decisions and help us and help guide us on the transition. And then a DSO compliance officer. So everything that we do will be open to public scrutiny, that we're making the right decisions and we're fulfilling our role as a neutral market facilitator. And I've just expanded on the blue box below, and our intention is to make sure that we start to share a lot more data than we currently do. We will be creating a data portal, and that means that we'll have the opportunity to share both planning data, so that would be things like DFAS on the portal, as well as all of our models and data that fulfills our models, including heat maps, and then in operational timescales, providing a lot more data in real time or near real time regarding what the constraints on our network. So that gives you a really high level overview of what we see as the DSO roles for the future and how we are using our own transition to a DSO to facilitate the net zero transition for the Northwest. Next slide, please, Lynn. So for us to be able to create that smart and flexible network that's able to adapt to customer behavior and provide capacity when and where it's needed at the right time, data is hugely important. And the wheel on the right-hand side shows you that whether it's engaging with our customers, trying to understand what demands that they want from us in the future, to actually providing data to electricity markets so we can actually start to buy flexibility and understand how we can access flexibility. data is at the center of all of that. That helps us make whole system decisions. So what I mean by whole system decisions is that between ourselves and the transmission operators and all the IDNOs connected to our networks, we're sharing data both in planning timescales and operational timescales, that we're actually making sure there is no conflict between us and we're making the right decisions. So data is hugely important going forward, and we will be sharing a lot more of the data that we have in our business, because it helps people make the right decisions to for us to access flexibility, and it helps us make the right decisions to provide energy efficiency advice and programs to people on the ground. So that was me. I hope it wasn't too fast. There is a lot more detail behind all of this. I'm happy to come back at any time in the future. But today's session is all about flexibilities, but we thought it was worth just giving a bit of an overview as far as where distribution system operation is, because flexibility is one of those fundamental things that we'll need to get right and do more of in the future. So back to you, Catherine.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Thanks for sharing. It's now time for our Q&A session. So if you have any questions for Simon, for Martin, for Johnny, or just any questions in general, now's the time to put them in the chat. We have had one already from Paul Morris, who asked, do you count the embedded carbon of the vehicle manufacturer in your carbon count for Electricity Northwest? Which Lottie kindly responded to. Thank you, Lottie. Saying that it will be counting embedded carbon as part of our Scope 3 reporting from April 2022. Do any of our speakers have anything to add to that? Oh, Johnny's added some in the chat as well. Would you like to explain that, please, Johnny?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's as per what's in the chat, really. You'll find some more information in our environmental action plan, which covers off our internal facing commitments to become a net zero organisation. But in short, Paul, the answer is no, not currently. In defining our Scope 3 emissions and starting to set targets, we've focused on the biggest chunks of emissions, which are in our major construction projects, as you might expect. So we're going to start there, and we're going to start to work with our supply chain contractors who do work on the network in particular. But we will be keeping that under review in coming years to make sure that we've got a Scope 3 set of emissions, which is actually representative of what we do. So no, not today in terms of the embodied emissions within our vehicles, but I would hope that's something that we can look at with a view to include in future years as we keep that target under review. And I'll drop a link in the chat as well to that environmental action plan, if that's of interest.
Real, thanks for that, Johnny. That's one to keep an eye out for at future webinars then, I assume. But yeah, do have a look at the link that Johnny's just going to send through. Okay, we have a question from Peter Bullock, who asks, how can domestic households get involved in flexibility? I guess that's one that we can answer later. Hopefully that will be answered during Lois and Keith's section, but if not, we can pick that up later for you, Peter. Same for that one from you, Julio. Hopefully anything about flexibility will come later on and we'll get it answered for you if not. Thank you, Paul, for your response as well. Oh, a nice little chat going on. This is what we like to see. Simon, this one's probably for you. Do you envisage the DSO's role including storage in the future? And in light of the recent power outages in Scotland, what plans do you have to improve resilience?
That's a really good question. So we do see storage of all types playing a role as far as flexibility is concerned in the future. At the moment, we have significant amounts of batteries connected to our network, generally much larger batteries, but we do expect to see in the future batteries connected in domestic properties and other forms of storage, including, you know, the storage of hydrogen once it's been created from water using an electrolyzer. and then using them in power generation. As far as resilience is concerned, I think the Storm Arwen, which was an exceptional event, has shown that although our networks are fairly resilient, that actually for those really exceptional storms that there are more that we can do to build resilience into the network. I think a lot of the northern organisations, the DNOs, have been devastated by the storms. You know, they've lost significant kilometres of overhead lines because of windborne materials and blown down trees, and there are only certain things that we can do to improve the resilience of networks by. But overhead lines, as we all know, will be susceptible to the climate and to the weather, unfortunately.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I think we're all still battling against Mother Nature to a certain degree, but thank you very much for that answer. That appears to be it for the questions for now, other than the flexibility ones, but like I said, we'll hopefully get those answered for you later. Oh, we've just got one more question through from Oliver, if that's okay. Will there be an increase in encouraging the use of hybrid vehicles before the push for EVs? Anyone got anything to say on that one?
Hi, Oliver. I'm happy to take that one.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, there will be, because there is certain roles within our organisation, I'm sure others amongst you, who EV's just not there yet. So you people who maybe have to go off road and do long distances, that kind of thing. So we try and encourage the plug-in hybrids, because we want to get the habits of plugging in there. But there is definitely, I think the class of the mild hybrids, aren't they? So there is still, we still want them on our fleet, and we're still pushing that because they are still much better than sort of previous. So it's a good question, and I don't think there'll be a push for it. It's more a necessity because of role. But I can understand people wanting to go on that journey towards EV.
Yeah, so just add to that, I think, you know, Martin's talking to, if you like, our own internal journey as an organisation. I think certainly in terms of what we'll be promoting to other businesses outside of our own, battery EVs will certainly be pushing strongly, because, you know, as per government policy and strategy, we know that's the direction we're all headed in. So that's what we'll be pushing most strongly. But exactly as Martin said, there will be certain instances where a hybrid's more appropriate for certain organisations or individuals, as a stepping stone, really, until we get to the point where we've got the extended ranges that some people will need. But I think, you know, when people do some of the more detailed analysis of what their travel patterns are, I think invariably people find that they have the range of a battery EV. It tends to be sufficient for what people need. That won't always be the case, but I think on the whole, a battery EV will serve the majority of people's needs pretty well. And as we said earlier, the network will be able to accommodate the connection of both pure full battery EVs and hybrids, and that's precisely the work that we'll be doing to build the capacity within the network.
Thank you, Martin and Johnny, for answering that one. There's a link to climate adaptation reports from Lottie in the chat, which will hopefully help with more info on that as well. But that is it for now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll take a break for about 10 minutes. So we'll meet you back here at 10:55. Time to get a brew, stretch your legs, do whatever you need to do, and we'll see you back here at 10:55. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope we're all feeling suitably refreshed and replenished. I've got myself a brand new cup of tea and I'm ready to go. Let's get straight into it. The next speaker we have is Lois Clark, who is the DSO commercial lead. Lois is going to be talking to us about flexibility services and giving us an overview.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. So as Catherine's mentioned, yeah, I'm going to be giving you an overview of our flexible services. So we're going to look at today a bit of a more in-depth run through of our current requirements, what we've done so far and where we see things going in the next few years. So just before we get started, just so I can help tailor this a little bit, I wanted to do a quick poll. So just to find out a bit more about you all and what you're hoping to get from today. So have you participated in our flexible services tenders before? And if not, have you participated in any other DNO's tenders? And then thirdly, what do you feel are the biggest barriers to providing flexible services? So we know that a lot of people have previously said, you know, it could be the cost or location. So, you know, you might want to participate, but we don't have any requirements within your region currently. Timescales, so in terms of putting bids together, or contract lengths that are available. So I'll just leave that up for a minute and let's get some responses through.
Yeah, there's just some responses coming through now, Lois. I'll leave it open for just a few more seconds just so people can put the responses in, and then I will end it and publish for you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so it looks like we've got quite a lot of people that haven't participated in either our tenders or any other networks tenders previously. So a lot of that might be informed by some of those barriers that we're seeing there. So that's very useful. I'll bear that in the back of my mind as we go through the rest of it. So in terms of what we've done so far, within Electricity North West, we started offering flexible tenders in June 2018. And since then, we've published 107 requirements. So that's across 107 different constraint management zones across 9 tenders with a total of 750 megawatts. So those numbers might look a little bit low compared to some other networks, but we are a single license area. So we're actually the smallest geographical region of any other network operator. So that's me fighting my corner when everyone says that our numbers are lower than other people's. So what are flexible services? So just in case anyone's new to the game, as it were. So flexible services is the term given to the act of reducing or increasing consumption or generation following the receipt of a signal. So this is in response to a network constraint, and essentially it helps us manage those constraints by asking people to go up or go down when we need it. So a network constraint could be classified as when our safe network operating limits are breached. So that could be from a number of reasons. It could be for helping us manage, you know, just periods of high load on the network. It could be helping us manage a planned outage. So if we're doing some maintenance or some construction within the area, or it could be due to a network fault. So essentially it means that the requirement for electricity or demand in the area is greater than the amount that our assets are actually capable of providing. So in return for providing these services, we offer payments to anyone that is capable of doing so. So in terms of why now, so as Johnny and Simon have mentioned in their introductory pieces, really, the huge increase that we're seeing in low carbon technologies on our network means that demand is increasing significantly. So as everyone starts to adopt these, then the demand goes up, and we're seeing it quite a lot of hotspots within certain areas as well, which means that we need to reinforce our network to ensure that we can continue to meet these demands. So reinforcement costs money. So that's part of the 1.8 billion that we're investing in our network over the next 5 years. A significant proportion of that is due to reinforcement to help us meet these requirements. And so a certain proportion of that cost is passed on to our customers through electricity bills. But then this does mean quite a bit of disruption. So I'm sure lots of people have had their roads dug up by us having to lay new cables, or, you know, you've seen the roadworks in the area as we're doing some large projects. So some of these larger requirements, especially on our grid and primary substations, which are so our extra high voltage network, where we've currently got requirements for flexibility, these projects can take several years and cost several £1 million. So we have to plan them well in advance, so we know kind of what's coming and make sure that we're ready by the time the demand reaches that point. So what are the benefits of flexibility? So it means that we can utilise our existing assets. So we often see that we have peaks at certain times of day. So the winter peak, so I'm sure everyone, you know, as soon as you get home at 4 o'clock, turning on your heating, putting the kettle on and the telly on, so we see a massive spike at this time of day. So instead of having to reinforce the network and put in a much larger asset to cope with what we might be seeing as only a peak during a few hour period over the winter months, instead we can incentivise people to provide services during that time instead, because we don't want to install a huge new asset that's actually only going to be utilised for those few hours. So this helps us to reduce our emissions because we're not having to install much larger equipment that isn't going to be used. And it means a reduction in supply interruptions. So it helps us to provide a more resilient network, and again, with less disruption. So the fewer times that we have to dig up the roads to put in more cables, the better. So it does support community energy groups and local businesses. So this is very much a two-way street. So that diagram that Simon showed about the changing landscape of networks and becoming a system operator, showing that instead of it being a top-down approach, it's very much a two-way street now. So anyone can provide these services, be it through low carbon technologies or any other kind of generation or demand reduction. And ultimately, by avoiding this reinforcement, we can pass those savings on to our customers through cheaper bills. So I've just got some examples of flexible services here because it often helps to contextualise. So for demand, this could be turning off or shifting energy intensive processes. So especially for industrial and commercial customers, you know, moving any systems that might use a lot of electricity during certain periods of the day. If that's contributing towards that peak or that constraint, if they could be shifted, then that could help us avoid some of these constraints. Also controlling heating systems like heat pumps or EV chargers. For generation, that can be provided by renewable generators or batteries or standby generation. So we see lots of our industrial and commercial customers often have standby generators. So like a supermarket might have generators there to keep the freezers on, for example. So instead, those could be used to help provide services when they're not in use by the organisation themselves. And then we're also really happy to include energy efficiency within our flexible tenders. So ultimately, it does reduce the demand on the network. So you're helping to alleviate that constraint from happening in the first place. So things like LED lighting, solar panels, insulation, and other things like heat pumps as well can all help to improve energy efficiency and therefore reduce the constraints that we see on the network. So we currently have 4 different flexibility service products. So these were agreed between all different DNOs across the UK last year. So everyone's agreed on the terminology and on these parameters. So it means that if you participate in a secure service in Manchester, it will be the same as a secure service in Scotland, Cardiff or London as well. So the key bit here was simplicity. So making it as easy as possible for people to participate across the whole of the UK, because we recognise that lots of people have got assets all over the region. So I'm going to go into these in a bit more detail on the next slide, but a key thing to remember is that the sustain and secure products, those are pre-fault. So essentially it's where we require some help to manage a constraint before there's been an actual issue on the network. So that's a bit more proactive. Whereas dynamic and restore, these are post-fault related products. So that is reacting to an issue that's happened on the network. So because we don't know when these issues are going to happen, they've got a relatively low utilisation certainty. Because if we knew when the faults were going to appear on our network, then we'd have a lot less problems in general. So sustain here, this is providing a scheduled response to prevent network constraints. So we can identify times where we think that demand is likely to exceed capacity, and then we can secure contracts several years in advance, which have got a high level of certainty. So these are your more reliable everyday products. So we might say that we need you between 9 to 5 every day, Monday to Friday for the next year. So a secure service, again, is scheduled in advance and has got a relatively high level of certainty. but it helps us to prevent the network from exceeding. So it might be some of your winter peaks, or more commonly to do with helping us manage our planned outages. So if we know that we're going to be maintaining an asset over a few weeks, then this would help us to manage that risk over those few weeks. Dynamic instead, so this is a post-fault related product. So it means that once there has been a fault on the network, we no longer have enough capacity within our remaining assets to keep all of our customers on supply. So that would be someone reducing their consumption or agreeing to stay off to help us to restore other people, or increasing generation at that time to help us get things going again. So this differs slightly from restore. So that's where we've had a complete loss of supply. So this is where we would ask people to stay off supply so that we can then restore other parts of the network. So this one is more related to what we call CIs and CMLs. So that's customer interruptions and customer minutes lost. So it's not directly driven by a reinforcement requirement, but is more in helping us to manage where we do have, much more widespread faults on the network. And this will be key in our net zero transition, because we do have quite a reliance at the moment on mobile generation, which does have quite a high carbon cost associated with it. So we're always looking for new ways that we can roll out both more flexibility and help to reduce our carbon reliance. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Keith now. So he's going to talk you through our current requirements.
Thanks, Lois. So, Lois has given you an overview of our flexible services in general, and I'm going to take you through our latest requirements. So this year, in October, we published our latest set of requirements, which requests, there's 37 locations within the northwest of England, with a request of up to 259 megawatts of capacity that we're requiring, with £2 million worth of availability for of funding available for these services. So the main areas that we cover, in Manchester, there's 12 sites with 50 megawatts. Lancashire, there's 8 sites with 136 megawatts, and Cumbria with 17 sites with 72 megawatts. There are some other bordering sites that are not included in these figures. And below, there's an indication of the rough kind of capped costs that we're potentially aiming to spend on these, or willing to offer to spend on these per year. So we offer a flexibility map on our website, which lays out the different flexible services that we're looking for. It has the 2 main colours. It's got the kind of bold colour, which shows our latest requirements. And then we also show a shaded colour, which shows potential future requirements that we may be looking for. And this also shows our ED2 requirements, so right up to 2028, our kind of expectations of where we think we may need services in the future. And the key for the different symbols are shown down here. So if you then click on one of the symbols, you'll be able to open up the requirements that we're asking for each one. So you'll be able to see the maximum power requirements, the type of service that we're requiring, the delivery start dates, which financial year we're asking for the requirements, the time and the times of day. And that gives you a lot more information on those. And then you can find that map on our flexible services homepage, and also on our current requirements page. To participate in our flexible invitation to tender, you can go on our current requirements page on the website, and on there is the invitation to tender, terms and conditions, a copy of the standard flexible agreement that we would ask you to sign on to. a copy of the technical specification for the tender, the summary of the site requirements, the half-hourly flexibility requirements, the online pre-qualification questionnaire, and there's also a postcode checker to check whether you are within one of our regions that we're tendering for requirements at the moment. So we've listened to the feedback that we've had from our customers so far, and we've adapted our processes to make the process much easier for people to join in with. So we've introduced ceiling prices, which encourage flexibility providers to submit competitive prices for the competition. So that gives a cap on the amount that we're potentially willing to spend per service if we were to be able to achieve the full requirement. Now, we don't give the actual price that we're going to spend, so it's a competitive tender, but that at least gives you a kind of maximum idea of what we're prepared to spend. And those values have been worked out using the Common Evaluation Methodology tool, which has been developed within the ENA Open Networks project with all the other network operators. You can also find a copy of this within the current tender requirements in Appendix 3. We also have an embedded pre-qualification questionnaire on our website. It used to be a Word document, but we've improved on that to make it simpler to understand and fill in. It saves you the time and effort and ensures that we have all the required information we need to assess your applications. So this is the PQQ that we have on the website. So you would fill this in once you've signed up to our dynamic purchasing system, which is on Picklo, and uploaded your assets onto the Picklo platform. It asks for the technical details of the site and the capabilities for delivering flexibility. And we're expecting within this current tender that people will fill this in before the 21st of January, which will allow them to participate in the current tendering process. If you need any help with that, please do book one of our one-to-one surgery appointments. We're happy to help. And we do suggest that you have a look at this quite early on just to check that you are going to be able to fill this in. Please don't leave it to the last minute. So our current procurement timeline. So as I say, we launched the tender at the end of October. We're currently here. We're currently in December, and we're expecting people to have filled in their pre-qualification questions by the 21st of January, which means that you need to have put all your assets on the Picklo platform, filled in the PQQ documents by that point. On the 7th of February, the bidding opens to those participants who have successfully pre-qualified. And then on the 18th of February, the bidding closes with a contract award in March. So in order to participate, you'll need to sign up to the dynamic procurement system via Picklo Flex, upload your assets also via Picklo Flex, complete the pre-qualification questionnaire, which is available on our website, and then submit a bid via Picklo Flex. We've also this year updated our website. So we have a year in review report that we publish, which shows how we're delivering against the requirements, the 6 flexibility principles that have been developed by the ENA, and it shows where we're up to with our current procurements to date, not including this current tender. We also have a distribution flexibility procurement statement, which Lois is going to go into later. We offer a glossary of terms because we understand that some of the terminology that we use, you can get a little bit lost in it. So there's the glossary available on the website to help kind of demystify some of that. We've got a copy of the standard flexibility agreement, the updated technical specifications document, and then we also offer a copy of the CHEM Common Evaluation Methodology and Tool, so that people can figure out, so people can see how we're evaluating the requirements for flexibility versus standard reinforcement, which offers some transparency in our decision-making processes. And we also offer the surgery appointments, which can be accessed via the online booking system. So the Piccolo Flex platform, in 2018, we began signposting our flexibility requirements on the Piccolo Flex platform. And last year, we joined UKPN and SPEN in utilising the platform for the procurement of tenders and using its dynamic purchasing system. And that just allows us to do all the kind of necessary background checks, things like credit checks and companies checks. It's the UK's leading marketplace for DSO flexibility procurement. It provides market visibility and transparency, and it streamlines the process for flexibility procurement, qualification, auctions and contracts. And it stimulates the participation from flexibility providers. Obviously, with multiple DNOs using it, it allows you to have one common platform that a few of us are using, so that, you know, if you're operating across the UK, it's only one system that you've got to get used to. So you can go onto the Piccolo Flex website via the address provided. You can view our current requirements, sign up for the DPS, upload your requirements and pre-qualify your flexibility assets, submit a bid, and you can also view our past competition data. And Piccolo Flex do actually also offer support if you need any help filling in the platform, or if you want a personalised demo with one of their team. So now just going to go through some key developments that we've had in 2021. So as a company, we've implemented a new network management system. This has allowed us to, this system has been brought in, and it actually allows us to modernize the system and make the most of flexibility within the network going into the next kind of decade onwards. And it will allow us to kind of bring in things like our active network management system and to dispatch flexibility services directly from the platform alongside other flexible activities. We're also rolling out low voltage network monitoring, and that allows us to get better visibility of the network so that actually we can look at flexibility lower down in the network and activate it where it's needed. We've secured several contracts during our spring 2021 tender, so we'll be going live with those soon. We've recently submitted our ED2 business plan, which does include a DSO annex, and we had a consultation on that as well. We've standardized the pre-qualification criteria, and we've published the ceiling prices in our bids, in our tenders. We've also implemented the flexible power platform and standardized the reporting. So flexible power, we joined 4 other DNOs who are already using the flexible power platform. And the platform allows us to dispatch and settle flexible services within the network. The really good thing about that is, again, it's a standard tool that most of the UK DNOs are now using. So again, it's the commonality across the industry that you only have to sign up for one type of platform. And it offers APIs for the dispatch, and it also offers the benefits of scheduling, and we can pre-schedule flexible services requirements, as well as scheduling the slightly more reactive types of services and dispatch them via an API service. So using the platform, you can declare your flexible asset availability. You'll receive the dispatch signals. You can view the information relating to the services and the settlement reports all in one place, and measure the energy provided to the DNO through an automated settlement process. So over the next few years and over the next few months and years, we are going to develop the Flexible Power platform as a collaboration. So some of the highlights of the things that we're going to put into the system in the future, the availability of declarations can be loaded into the system months ahead of service periods. Currently, the platform only allows for kind of week ahead scheduling of the availability. We're going to start offering notifications and reminders, so that, but these will come with an opt-out capability, and these will just remind service providers when they're due to offer us a service. We're going to directly interface with our network management system, and that will further enhance the capabilities to join up all the different flexibility and dispatch capabilities across the network. We're improving the user interfaces on the website and improving the document standardization. We're going to start offering enhanced visibility of baselines, so that you know what we're measuring against before you actually have to deliver. And we're also increasing the range of baselines in line with the Open Networks project recommendations. We're going to use more APIs, which will allow increased data transfers both internally and externally. And that's useful just because that allows further automation within both sides, speeding up and improving the service. We're going to start offering variable asset capacity. So at the moment, it's a very static number that we would ask people to deliver. In the future, we're going to be able to ask people to vary the amount of capacity that they're offering us. At the moment, the system only really works for demand turn down. So in the future, it's also going to offer demand turn up and generation turn down capabilities. And then we're also adding user profiles, which will allow for enhancements of who's on the platform and what access they have to the platform. So I'll now hand back to Lois.
Hiya, thanks, Keith. So in terms of some of the information that we've published recently, there was a new license requirement, so it's called Standard License Condition 31E. So that came into effect on the 1st of April this year. So all network operators now have to publish a distribution flexibility procurement statement. And then in May next year, we'll also produce a procurement report. So the easy way to remember this is the procurement statement is a looking forward document. So it tells you what our intentions are for the next year. And then in May, that's a looking back report. So it will say, this is what we said we were going to do, and this is what we actually did. So the statement says, these are all of the areas in which we're intending to procure flexibility and basically describe what our approach is. So It will cover a lot of the things that Keith has just spoken about. So our approach to procurement, our approach to engagement, and generally how to get involved. So I'd encourage anyone that is not that familiar with flexible services to have a look at this, because it's basically a one-stop shop of, if you want to get involved, this is how you can, and this is what we're doing about it. So that is available on our website, and we will be refreshing it every year. So come April, there'll be a new version which will state our intentions for the financial year 2023, and then our procurement report will give you the results of everything that we've done so far. So whether all of our tenders were successful, the prices that were paid, and how much flexible capacity we've actually dispatched. So I'll touch now on the Open Networks project. So we're active members of the Open Networks project, which is run by the Energy Networks Association. So all the UK DNOs are party to this, and we also have representation from Ofgem and BEIS. So recognising that this is a very fast moving sector, but ultimately everything's being driven by standardisation at the moment. So everyone needs to be on the same page. So at the bottom there, we've got, so these are the product numbers. So these are all the different work streams that we're currently looking at. So there's the common evaluation methodology, looking at procurement processes, things about active network management. So that's how we manage flexible connections on the network, commercial agreements, so the contracts that we use when we secure any agreements for flexibility, primacy rules. So that's how we decide who gets dispatched, especially interactions with national grids and some of their markets, non-DSO markets, so it's looking at things like secondary trading, baselining, which I've seen some questions come through in the chat on that, so we'll touch on that briefly later, and then curtailment as well. So there's an awful lot of work streams that go on within this product, but it's essential really at the moment, and to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and because there's so much interactivity between them. So brief overview now. The common evaluation methodology was developed in collaboration with all of the DNOs and was produced by Baringa. So it was built on the Ofgem cost benefit analysis model. So it compares flexibility versus network reinforcement. So since April, this tool has been being utilised by all network operators. So the reason for this is that it makes sure that all network operators are using the same criteria to evaluate different bids. So you know that everyone should be doing this in the same way. So previously there might have been other aspects that might be either taken into consideration or left behind, whereas now this gives you a common framework for all DNOs. So we use this tool to evaluate our autumn and spring 21 tenders, and we'll be using it in this current tender as well. So we do use this model to identify what the ceiling prices are for each of our current requirements. So the costs that you see attributed to each of our current zones are identified using this model, which gives you a sense of consistency, so you know that you'll be fairly evaluated against what we've put out in the first place. So there was a question that came into the chat about carbon, the carbon impact, so especially from things like diesel generators. So that is something that we are looking at improving on. So it can be included as an option to be evaluated within the model at the moment, but there isn't that much consistency within approach or within the figures that are used for evaluating that. So that has been identified as a key part to add into it within the next year. So rest assured that that is on everyone's radar. The next one is what we call product 2. So that looks at procurement processes. So this one has been an enduring product over the last 3 or 4 years. So recognising that everyone, first of all, was trying out different methods of procurement to see what worked for them. And we've done extensive stakeholder engagement on this. So the summary of where the engagement got to over the last few years has got us to the point now where we operate 2 procurement rounds. So that's in autumn and in spring of each year. So we also use the DPS system, which we currently use the one on the Piclo Flex platform. and we have the pre-qualification questionnaire. So we use these because of how they can help us to streamline operations. So the DPS means that instead of having to get all the paperwork and stuff ready for, you know, a few weeks period, you can sign up to the DPS at any point within a 12-month period before the tender opens. So you can get things done sort of before you meet the deadline, really. And the pre-qualification questionnaire just asks some additional technical questions. So we like to do that before the bidding window opens, so that you know before you have to submit a bid whether you meet the criteria or not. So that just helps us to save any wasted effort. But we're also looking at a lot more clear and consistent reporting on this. So through things like the distribution flexibility procurement statement, but standardising how all DNOs report on this so that you can clearly compare against each network to say, this is what you said you were going to do and this is what you actually have done. So ultimately we are looking at standardising things further, and next year we'll be looking at standardising the PQQ even more, and with a view to moving towards more real-time procurement. So it is something that will take several years, but is a key focus, especially for ED2. So looking at having, you know, potentially shorter contracts or longer contracts that you can do either much further in advance or at a closer to real-time market. Product 4 looks at the standard flexibility agreement. So we initially developed a common contract for the use of flexibility services across all UK DNOs, and that was finalised in April of 2020. So we've used that for several procurement rounds now, and there continues to be developments to it. So we're currently using version 1.2. So that has got some updates to it based on feedback that we have from stakeholders. So this is a continual product. So recognising that when we first issued the contract, most DNOs were still operating in quite a nascent market. So now that we have more experience and there's a lot more participants coming to play, they're now providing their feedback. So we are developing it further, and the ESO has now signed up to it as well. So we're looking at making a kind of standard framework terms that will apply to both ESO services and DNO services. So again, that consistency. So you know what you're signing up for will be the same wherever you go. Product 7 is looking at baselining principles. So there were a few questions on that in terms of how do you measure what response has been provided, because ultimately that informs how much money you will receive for it. So work, there was the whole product on it last year, which looked at establishing the common baselining principles. So this it created different baselining methodologies for each of the products. So recognising that if it's a secure or a sustain requirement, it'll have a very different profile to that if it was a post-fault, because you don't know when those events are going to happen. So they have to have different methodologies for calculating. So the principles have now been established, and over the next few months they will be being implemented within the Flexible Power platform. So because 4 other DNOs in the UK also use that Flexible Power platform, again, it's that consistency just being embedded, and you'll be able to view all of these details within the platform if you do sign up. Products 3, 5, 8 and 9, so apologies, that's lots of numbers there, but essentially all of this is looking at flexible connections onto the network. So how people have access to the network in terms of security of supply and when they're allowed to utilise full capacity. So that could be in terms of curtailment, so the provision of information about curtailment. So when you're going to be slightly curtailed, how much in advance, and who has access to the network at certain times. So looking at different kind of stack positions, or we have a merit order management system, and the rules for who gets to stay on and who has to go off. So there's a lot of work being developed on that at the moment, which will continue into next year as well. So BEIS and Ofgem jointly published the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan in July. So this is in the context of transitioning to a net zero system, and essentially covers all these bits in the little honeycomb section on the left. So that's why the Open Networks project is split into a lot of those, specific products, because it directly correlates to what is being mandated by government at the moment. So the standardisation of all of these things on the left has now been mandated. So pre-qualification criteria, we're already on with that, as with baselining. So for procurement timescales and metering requirements, there's still quite a bit of work to do there, just to make sure that markets are fair and accessible to all. Contracts are still being developed, and API interfaces, there's still quite a bit of work to do in those ways. But evaluation and carbon intensity is another key aspect of it, especially in the context of a net zero system. So ultimately, the aims of standardising all of these things will be to enable stacking, so making participating in flexibility a more viable option for people, because a lot of the time it might not be a financial end in itself. So by stacking these different services on top of each other, you can essentially get more money for providing those services. But it's also with a view to facilitating smart appliances and smart charging. So recognising that there are a lot more domestic customers that want to engage in these markets. So by adopting these new smart appliances, that we can help get them involved within these markets, really. But that's all done by providing more data. So Simon mentioned at the start, open and accessible data underlies all of the key aspects of transitioning to a DSO and net zero, but has to be accompanied by local engagement as well. So we're looking at whole system benefits. So there's no point in robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we're looking at how can we benefit the whole system and what's best for the region as a whole. So on that, the Open Networks project for 2022 is a kind of direct correlation of the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan. So we also have what we're calling Product Zero next year, which is going to be an overarching common framework for flexibility services and monitoring our compliance and our progress against the targets set out in the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan. So if anyone wants any more information on any of these, then there are reports that are published on the ENA website. So there's quite an extensive resource library. So the PID was recently issued for consultation, and the feedback we got from that was quite positive. So we will be cracking on with all of these come January. But if anyone wants any more information, then there are reports for each of these products that have been published on that website. So finally, this is just if anyone needs any more information on things that we've touched on, because we recognise that lots of people have quite specific requirements. So any general queries, we have a dedicated mailbox, which is flexible.contracts@ENWL. We also have feedback forms on our website, and you can book a one-to-one surgery appointment. I think we've added that into the chat there, but so that you can chat to either me or Keith or anyone else in the team if you have a site that you're looking that you want to participate with, or you just want to know how something else works. But anything you need at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And lastly, if you sign up to our distribution list, then you'll be notified of any further events that we have, but also you'll get friendly reminders. So when we say there's 1 week left to register, or 1 week left to put your bids in, so please do sign up to those. I think we're going to go over to a wider question and answer section now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lois and Keith, for explaining the flexibility aspects in detail. It's been really, really useful for a lot of people by the sound of things. I'm just going to start a poll now that's a little bit of a feedback poll for this webinar. So we'd really appreciate it if as many of you as possible fill this out. Obviously, we won't be publishing these results, so don't worry about that. They're completely anonymous. I've just launched that now for you. There were a couple of questions in the chat earlier about flexibility, so I'm just going to go back to those, if that's all right, Lois and Keith. The first one was from Peter, and he asks, how can domestic households get involved in flexibility?
Yeah, so currently the minimum criteria for participation is 50 kilowatts. So currently a domestic customer wouldn't be able to participate directly but you could do so via an aggregator. So an aggregator, if it had, say, like 25 or 30 households, that would meet the minimum criteria in order to participate. So the reason we currently have this level is that all of our current requirements are on our extra high voltage network. So the requirements, you know, are into the several megawatts. So we can't currently directly dispatch at a domestic level. So doing it via an aggregator is the easiest way, but we will be reducing this level in ED2, especially as we start rolling out some of our LV monitoring. So we've got quite an extensive programme of monitoring, which puts devices on 5,000 of our LV and HV substations within the next 2 years. And then by the end of ED2, it will cover 95% of our customers within the EMW region. So that gives us the visibility of our network to be able to say, okay, I know I have a peak or a constraint at this time of day, and then we can start offering flexibility at those lower voltages, which will mean that domestic customers will be able to participate directly.
Well, thanks, Lois. Hopefully that answers your question, Peter. And there was also a question from Julio who asked, how do you see the physical network informing flexibility requirements and procurement in near real time?
At the moment, we use our DFES forecast, so that's our distribution future electricity scenarios. So we produce forecasts each year based on a number of different scenarios. So there's 5 of them, and you can view all the details of them on our website. So we look at what we currently have installed on our network and what the available headroom is based on different connections trends, and then a lot of other kind of external factors. So, you know, economic prosperity, or different trends in uptakes of LCTs, and that all goes on to inform where we may need flexibility in the future. So at the moment, we're driven by where we actually have constraints at the moment. But as Keith mentioned earlier, on our flexibility map, any areas that are highlighted grey are those which are approaching being constrained. So that gives you a view as to where we think we're going to need flexibility in the future. So it's not a requirement now, but it can help give people an idea, you know, that kind of 5 year in advance of where we think we're going to need it. And in April next year as well, we'll be publishing our network development reports, which will provide a bit more detail into where we think we're going to need that flexibility as again, a few years look ahead.
Brill, thank you again. I believe that's all the questions from earlier have now been answered, but please, if you feel they haven't, please copy and paste them, and we'll make sure we get back to them. I think a few of them may have got lost in the chat on here. But there's a couple of questions at the bottom here. So let's start with this one from Philip. Any plans to utilise the batteries in EVs to support the grid?
Yes, so we are technology agnostic. So at the moment, anyone that can provide either an increase or a reduction in energy at, you know, upon receipt of a signal can participate in our services. So absolutely, if you have a fleet of EVs that you can control, then yes, they would be eligible to participate. I think so. There's some other questions within the chat here about participation. So as I mentioned before, the minimum megawatt for entry is 50 kilowatts. So we will be reducing that in the future, but for this tender round and likely for the next one as well, it will be 50 kilowatts. So the other bit is the pre-qualification. The most important thing about pre-qualification is being in the right area. So this is what differentiates distribution flexibility services from transmission electricity services, so such as through National Grid ESO. So for us, it's the constraint is on a particular asset, so you have to be connected to that asset in order to help alleviate the problem. So that's why on our map we kind of have the zones in there. We've also got a postcode checker, but if you want to check anything, you can also just email us your MPAN and we can confirm which asset you're connected to. But ultimately, if you're not connected to an asset that's constrained, then we don't really need any help because there's no constraint to be alleviated.
One further point to add on to what Lois said about the vehicle to grid, you just need to make sure that you have applied for a vehicle to grid connection to our network and have gone through the relevant checks and paperwork to do that. There is a new process that's been put on the website for that.
Real. Another one here. How do you manage your grid requirements when starting to integrate domestic and commercial customer-based flexibility? Which teams and departments oversee this effort?
Ramsey, I wonder whether you could elaborate on that slightly. So we currently have a mix of both domestic and commercial customers providing flexibility. So as long as you meet the criteria and can participate in the procurement round, then we already see that mix going on.
Thank you.
If you would like to hear from me, I could share a little bit more.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I was more actually trying to find out from the grid management perspective as opposed to the flexibility procurement perspective. About what teams are actually looking after the grid, because it's one thing actually trying to procure it, it's another thing keeping it all in balance.
Okay, so our network management system does a lot of this. So control engineers that we have that manage the network on a daily basis. But depending on the type of flexibility that is required, then it will be scheduled in via the flexible power portal at the moment. So there's quite a lot of automation that's already in place there, but we do have dedicated network management and control engineers that monitor this 24/7.
Thank you very much.
We've got one from George Huang at All Green Energy, who asks, do we need to have an electricity generation license to aggregate DR and generator?
No, so only the generators themselves need to have, well, they need to be approved to generate onto our network. So they would have to have a confirmed connection, and be compliant with things like engineering recommendation G99. So as part of the pre-qualification process, we go through all the data that's provided. So it could be the MPAN and check the connection agreement and the confirmed import and export capacities, just to make sure that you are actually allowed to offer what you're saying you're going to offer.
Well, thank you very much for that one, Lois. And there's a follow-up one from Julio on the residential customers aspect. If residential customers participate via aggregators, are there any challenges in terms of network connectivity and baselining when grouping them to resolve constraints upstream in the network?
Keith, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. The answer is yes, it is a different challenge that we have to face. It's one that we're currently looking into. At the moment, we're focusing on, it's probably going to be along the lines of nomination baselines from the aggregator to us, but they also have to provide copies of the metering data back to us, which helps verify that the response has actually been provided. But in terms of making sure that they're within the right area, the aggregator is responsible for giving us a list of the MPANs that are pre-qualified for that area that they're going to use for that service. So that then allows us to make sure that they are actually within the right area and delivering the service that we're requesting within the right place.
Excellent. I hope that answered all of your questions, Julio. He says, great, thanks. So sounds like it may have done. That appears to be it for the questions, which is great. Thank you everyone for participating. Oh, what about yours, Stephen? Did we miss one? Apologies. Thought that had been answered in one of the questions, but I will, in one of the other questions, but I'll check for you.
Well, so Stephen, yes, if you could ramp up generation on demand, then yes, it's eligible. So the pre-qualification form, so as I mentioned earlier, you as long as you're in the right area, then yes, you can participate. So the pre-qualification form is available on our website, and we've actually got a webinar on there as well, which talks through each of the questions that we ask, so what that means and what kind of information we're asking for and where you can find it. So I'd recommend having a look at that. So that will give you a kind of a step-by-step of each of the requirements. And then if you have any further questions, you can come directly through to us.
Yeah, all the contact details are still on the screen, so feel free to drop any sort of further questions, or if you've got anything quite complicated or quite specific, feel free to send it through. He just asked if there's a minimum load required, Lois.
Yes, it's 50 kilowatts.
50 kilowatts, there we go. Thank you very much. Any further questions, please send them through, as I said, and there is all the contact details on the screen right this second. We will also be sharing the slides from today's event, as well as the recording, and we'll get that to you in the near future. Thank you again for taking part, all of the speakers today. Thank you for giving up your time to be here. And thank you to everyone for attending. We hope you found it really, really useful. And we'll hopefully see you at the next one in the not so distant future.